Okay, welcome everybody. Nice to have you here. And today I'd like to share with you about the structure of yourself. This is very important knowledge to have that will help you in every area of your life. And it really should be required reading, as it were, for every human. But unfortunately, up to up to now, it's not been. And so a lot of people have been left in the dark, not really understanding who they are. And it's very difficult to go about life not knowing who you are, not knowing about your inherent powers and your nature and the structure of yourself. And so I figure this is going to be very life-changing and helpful to you to have this information. So as I usually do, I want to start by just giving you an overview of what the intention of this meeting is, so that you can make sure that you're in the right place. I don't want to waste anybody's time. So the overarching intention here is fundamentally it's about self-realization. And that is about knowing who you are. It's about knowing your powers, and it's about knowing your relationship with reality. And when you know this, this will remove fear from your life, and it will allow you to accomplish your authentic goals, those that are true to you, and it will give you true lasting fulfillment and peace in your life. This will help you in all areas of your life. So this is not just, self-realization is not just for people who want to go sit in a cave. Self-realization is your birthright. Everybody should be self-realized. You should know who you are. That really is a fundamental thing that everybody should have. So if that sounds of interest to you, then you're in the right place, and we'll proceed from here. So as I said, today I'd like to share with you something about the structure of yourself. And so why is this important? Because if you don't know about your structure, then you're going to have a very difficult time with self-mastery. So self-mastery is part and parcel of self-realization. Self-realization, as I said, is to know who you are and to know your powers and your relationship with reality. So that means you have to know about your own structure, your internal structure. You have to know about how nature is organized. So otherwise, you're just going to be in the dark. You're going to be feeling powerless much of the time. And if you just take inventory, you'll probably notice that a lot of the time you do feel powerless. So you might feel empowered up to a point, but then there will be certain conditions in your life. And when those conditions are met, then you feel powerless all of a sudden. So you might feel powerful when you're in your element, but then when the conditions change, then you will feel powerless. And that's not something that you really want to be struggling with in your life, because that, as I've said, that produces a lot of fear and distress in your life. And that's not what you really want. So having knowledge of your structure is really helpful for clarifying this. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. So a lot of people don't realize that they have a structure. But this is, again, one of those things that if you don't realize that you have a structure, then you're going to be really struggling in life. So many of you may be familiar with a person named Ramana Maharshi. And Ramana is very well known for a particular form of self-inquiry using the question, who am I? And so people have investigated using this form of self-inquiry where they ask, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And this can be very powerful, but unfortunately, it's often overly complicated because we can really simplify things. And that's what I intend to do here. So we can actually systematically investigate ourselves so that we can systematically answer that question, who am I? So the first thing to understand is that, and I want to actually, in a moment, I'm going to give you a guided, practical exploration of this so you can actually experience this directly for yourself, because that's very important. The knowledge alone does not make any change. You actually have to directly experience it. But I'm going to briefly give you some knowledge, and then we'll actually directly explore it together. Okay, but the first thing to understand is that your life consists of a lot of content. So right now I'm speaking. I notice some people are saying they can't hear, but most of you I think can hear. At least I'm seeing that there is some audio coming across. So there's sound happening. You're hearing something. Okay, so that hearing is part of the content. The sound is part of the content. We can't really separate hearing from sound. They go together. Okay, so I will use hearing and sound interchangeably in the sense that they're both referring to content. And similarly, we have our other senses. So you're seeing, and there's what is being seen. And then maybe you might be smelling things, maybe you might be tasting things, you might be also having tactile sensory input as well. Okay. So all of that is the content. There's content happening. And if you observe your experience very carefully, you'll see that that's the entirety of the content. I have often suggested that thought is another element of content, but if you're actually really carefully observant, you'll notice that thought is not separate from the other sensory data. So if you notice, how are you aware of thought? And you cannot be aware of thought except through your senses. So you might be hearing it subtly within yourself. You might be seeing it. You might be feeling it. But I guess in some cases, you might be tasting or smelling the thought. But apart from that sensory data, you cannot have a thought. All thought is structured in that sensory data. So your actual experience consists of content, and that content is sensory data, which is an amazing thing if you actually consider this for a moment, that your entire experience is constructed of these five senses. It's impossible for you to have some other experience apart from these five senses. And this is a powerful insight that's also an ancient insight. So if you were to, there are certain ancient scriptures, I would say actually all ancient scriptures make reference to this. Some of them make it explicitly. They explicitly state that apart from the five senses, which are often associated with five elements, so the five elements and the five senses are synonyms, that there is nothing else of this reality. This reality consists only of those things. So your entire experience consists only of those things. So the content level of yourself consists of those five things, which are arranged and associated in an infinite variety of ways, constructing all of the various experiences that you have. But just observe that in your life, and you'll notice it's very powerful to notice that there's never anything in your life that does not consist of those five things. It's never anything outside of that. So that's the content level. So content level consists of five elements, five senses. Now, the content is always changing, right? So the sound is changing, what you're seeing is changing, the smells are changing, the tastes are changing, the feelings are changing, it's all changing. So you can't be exclusively the content, because if you were exclusively the content, how would you be aware of the content? You would have no stable reference point from which to observe it. So there would actually be no you in that equation at all. But there is a you that's aware of the content, right? There's actually a reference, there's a stable reference point, a stable point of view. Now there are many intermediate points of view. I'll get to that in a moment, but there's a single stable point of view. There's one point of view that's unchanging. Has to be, because if that was not the case, as I said, if you were that which is changing, if you were exclusively that which is changing, then you would not actually be able to have any awareness of anything. So there has to be a stable point of view, stable reference point. So at the highest level, you are that. And this is what many masters are referring to when they're talking about, when they're pointing to who are you and inviting you to recognize who you are. The invitation then is to recognize that you are that ultimate stable unchanging reference point. So that's what that invitation is. So when Ramana is saying, who am I? It's to go through all of the content until finally there's a realization that who I am at the highest level, at the most fundamental level, is that which is changeless, that which is formless, that which is none of the content. So that is at the highest level. And I'm using that term highest level just to give some, just to define this in some way. But it's not absolutely true that it's higher. We could understand it as lower. We could call it fundamental. But the point is that there is a structure, there's a relationship. And I'm just using the term higher, but you can understand it in whatever way you want. But the point is, again, there's a structure. So that highest level, that absolute level, is unchanging, formless. And it is true that you are that. But it's also true that you are the totality. Because everything, actually, all the five senses, all of that content emerges from that same formless awareness. And this is all somewhat theoretical at this point, but in a moment, I'm going to guide you so that you can actually directly experience this for yourself. And then once you've had that experience, then we'll take this a little bit further so that you can actually, I'm going to actually give you some suggestions for things that you can do, that you can explore in your life that will allow you to better organize the content so that you can be more successful and happier in your life. Because self-mastery is about the total self. It's about having total self-knowledge, total self-awareness, and being able to organize the content in a way that is harmonious and aligned with your true desires. So this is another important point, because a lot of the time people are making this mistake of thinking, well, if only I can have this realization of myself as that absolute self, of that transcendent self, of that formless self, that's going to solve all my problems. And sorry to have to be the one to break it to you. It doesn't work that way. That will not work out in the way that you might be fantasizing. So people are often pursuing, they think, well, if only I can achieve this enlightenment thing, then everything's going to be great. Then my relationships will be great, my finances will be great, my health will be great, and everything's going to be fine then. If I can just achieve this magical enlightenment thing. Well, it depends really how you're defining enlightenment, but most people don't define it at all. But what they're vaguely imagining is that if they can just achieve this awareness or recognition of themselves as formless awareness, as that transcendent self, then somehow that's going to sort everything out. And rarely will that actually happen. In fact, oftentimes it will be the opposite. It will make the rest of your life, in some ways, more difficult, because then you'll stop caring, except you'll still care. You'll care, but not care at the same time. And that's a very difficult position to be in. So from my perspective, it's better to actually have total self-knowledge, have the knowledge so that you can actually start to organize the content in a better way, alongside with having the recognition of yourself as that formless transcendent self. Both should go together. If they don't go together, then it's going to be very difficult. So if you want to go live in a cave in the Himalayas or elsewhere, and that's your path, and you're committed to that, and you're seriously willing to give up on the finances and the relationships and all the rest of it, then you're always welcome to do that. But understand that that's a different path, and that path involves renouncing the world. But if you're not going to do that, if you're actually intending to stay in this world, then I promise you, you're going to be much happier and better off if you have an understanding of the structure and you organize that structure in a way that is harmonious and aligned with your values and your goals and your desires. Then alongside that, also have the transcendent self-awareness. Both should go together. If you're trying to separate them, then it's not likely to work out very well for you. I'm speaking from experience. So now I'd like to guide you to have an actual direct experience of what I've been describing theoretically. because this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where you can actually start to understand this and then translate this into actual results in your life. So for this, I'm going to, your presence is necessary. So ideally, you want to be in circumstances that allow you to be fully present to yourself and to your direct experience. If you are presently operating heavy machinery or something like that, then this would not be the optimal time to do this exploration. So if you are like driving a car right now, then I don't recommend that you do this exploration, because this exploration requires your full presence in order to really get the results. If you are in an environment where you can give your full presence to your actual direct experience, then I invite you to choose that. So your intention is extraordinarily powerful. Just choose to be fully present to yourself right now for the duration of this exploration, which will be 5, maybe 10 minutes. And then there are no real other prerequisites. However, if you can be reasonably comfortable, that will be supportive and helpful. So if you can put yourself into some situation that allows you to be reasonably comfortable, that would be ideal. If you can be upright and comfortable, that would be great. But if you don't know how to be comfortable while you're upright, then you may recline or lie down. You may use some kind of cushions or whatever is supportive for you. That's fine. The point is, you don't want to be distracted by discomfort. Sometimes, and I'm making this point just because sometimes people think, oh, the only way that I can do this kind of exploration is if I sit in lotus pose on a hard floor. And if if that works for you, great. I mean, that the reason people traditionally do that is because it's very supportive. But the problem is it takes a lot of practice in order to be able to do that comfortably. And if you have not practiced to do that comfortably, it will be very uncomfortable for you. So it's much better just to be comfortable. And so you can have success doing this sitting on a couch, sitting on a bed, sitting on a chair. If you need to lie down, that's fine, but preferably don't lie down in your bed, because if you do that, your subconscious is just going to cause you to go to sleep. And if it's comfortable, close the eyes. And the reason for closing the eyes is just because it will, again, reduce some of that unnecessary stimulation, and it will make it easier for you to be more present instead of being distracted by all of that other stimulation. If it's not comfortable for you to close the eyes, then you needn't do so. But it's just, the idea here is just that it can be supportive. So now observe your actual experience and notice right now that you are hearing. So notice that that hearing is taking place. And notice that that hearing is occurring in you. So the actual direct experience should be, or is, that the hearing is taking place in you. It's not taking place outside of you. As a mental construct, we can certainly believe or think that hearing is taking place outside, because we can argue that the sounds are taking place externally. But as an actual direct experience, independent of any thinking about it, but just the actual direct experience, it should be totally obvious that the hearing is taking place right here, right now, absolutely intimately, at no distance, completely in you. So just notice that. And then notice that the sound is always coming and going. There's always movement. There's always change. It's never always the same. So we're noticing that hearing and sound are taking place subjectively, internally, here and now, not at a distance, absolutely intimately, and that its nature is change. And then notice the sensations or feeling that is occurring. And notice that the feeling, the sensation, is also occurring within you, absolutely intimately, not at a distance. So as a mental construct, it may seem intellectually that the sensations or feeling is somehow external. It may seem that it is representing something outside of you. For example, if you are sitting on something, there may be sensations that you register as symbolizing something underneath you. And so it's possible that there may be some thought that says the sensation is happening external to me. But if you just pay attention to the direct experience, you'll notice that the feeling, the sensation is actually happening not outside of you, but it's happening just directly and intimately here and now within you. And that it's just pure feeling, it's pure sensation, and it's not actually an object. It's not actually the thing that you think it is, it's just the feeling. And then notice that that feeling or sensation is also characterized by movement or change. So it's not a constant thing that's unchanging, but it's characterized by change and movement. So change in movement may be slow change in movement or fast change in movement, but it's not constant. There's movement, there's variation. Now, with the eyes closed, the amount of visual stimulation should be reduced, but it's not entirely eliminated. So there's still some registering of some kind of visual sense, and you could notice that. So you might notice there might be internal images, or there might just be impression of light, which the brain might say is happening through the eyelids, but nonetheless, it's happening. There's some sense of some kind of imagery, even if it's subdued, it's there. And so you can notice that whether we call it imagining or visualization or visual data, the seeing is taking place intimately here now within you. So again, this is an exploration of the direct experience, just to notice what's actually happening prior to any thought about it, independent of any mental construct, just to notice that there is a pure seeing that is occurring, and that seeing is taking place not at a distance, but right now, right here. And then also notice that this seeing is also characterized by change and movement. So it's not constant. The change might be slow or it might be fast, but it's not constant. There's not a constant occurrence. It's changing. So we could do the same exploration with taste and smell, but for now, I will leave that to you. It's the same basic exploration, just to notice that those things are also occurring subjectively, and that they're happening internally here now, not at a distance. So then you can perhaps notice that apart from seeing, feeling, tasting, smelling, and hearing, is there any other is there any other content? Is there anything else that you can be aware of except what can be perceived through these five senses? And hopefully you will notice that there is nothing apart from what can be perceived through these 5 senses. However, even though there's there's nothing that can be uh, discovered or found apart from what can be perceived through the five senses, there remains you as that which is aware. So that which is aware cannot be tasted, cannot be touched, cannot be seen, cannot be heard, cannot be smelled, because it's not content, but it can at the very least be inferred. So if you're trying to feel it or taste it or see it or touch it or any of these things, then it won't work. But it can at the very least be inferred. So all of the content, all the sensory information is characterized by movement, by change. It's coming and going. So it appears and disappears. And that's obviously a visual reference, but we could apply that across all of the other senses, this sense of coming and going, emerging and re uh, merging back into something, like waves rising and falling. So then the question is, where's all this coming from and going to? And if you just carefully observe, and this is really the invitation that Ramana extended, it's possible to notice that all of the content, if you just observe it carefully enough, you'll see that it emerges from nothing and then it returns to nothing. So the same nothing, which is inferred to be that changeless source, which must be your truest or highest or most fundamental point of view, turns out to be the same source of all of the content. So the content is emerging out of this same nothing and then returning to the same nothing. So this tells us now something we can actually directly observe the actual structure of ourselves. If we pay attention, we can notice that there is a fundamental source, which is nothing. It's not a thing, cannot be observed through the five senses, and that all of the other content can be understood as through these five senses, and that it is all emerging from the same nothing and returning to the same nothing. So this is a direct experience. Don't necessarily try and grasp it with your thinking mind. Just notice it, just allow it. And then when you do feel ready to transition to an open-eyed state, that is assuming that you have your eyes closed, then I invite you to do that slowly. And there's no hurry to do so. If you're enjoying keeping your eyes closed, feel free to do so. But if and when you would like to open the eyes, please do so slowly so that you can integrate this whole experience, because there's a lot of uh, data that comes online for most of us when we open the eyes. So opening the eyes slowly allows you to integrate that so you can remain aware that all of this visual data is also happening here and now. It's so the illusion that usually takes place is, with all of that visual information, we start thinking, oh, I'm this separate thing existing in this larger context. It gives rise to that illusion. But if you actually just do this slowly, remaining continuously aware, you can notice that all of this visual data is still occurring here now subjectively within you. It's not separate from you. It's still in the same space of self that you are. So again, the habit is, with the eyes open, to more strongly associate with this point in space, with this body, and to say, I am this and I'm separate from that. But if you've really been paying attention, then you'll be able to notice that that's just an illusion, because the actual direct experience is that all of this is still happening here now in this space of awareness that you are. So depending on many factors, that might be a lot for you. Maybe that's the first time you've ever had that kind of uh, experience. It's also possible for some people, they say, well, what experience? I didn't experience anything. Uh, and um, and then for other people, you'll say, oh, I'm an old hat at this. I get it. Fine. So many possibilities are there, but you then can respect yourself where you are, and you can, if you need to just kind of rest and soak that in, do that. Don't try to fill up more space with more information. Just integrate that experience if that's what's best for you. For anybody who does want to explore this a little bit more, I'm gonna take this a little bit further and now give you some suggestions for how you can actually start to work with this in practice to better organize the content of your life. Okay, because what I would hope that you would now start to recognize, and it might just be a dim recognition at this point, but if you continue to work with this, it will grow. So this is really important to understand, that if you're just waiting, or if you think that you're just going to get some kind of uh, flashy experience, and that flashy experience is going to instantaneously transform your life, you you're making it unnecessarily difficult for yourself. I'm not saying that kind of thing cannot happen. It can, and it does happen to some people. But why do you want to insist that it has to be that way? Why limit yourself to that? Because statistically speaking, that doesn't seem to happen very often. But what is absolutely attainable by anybody is to actually apply yourself and progressively experience enhancements of clarity and self-awareness. So again, if you're thinking that the only way it can work is for you to wait for some kind of flashy experience, you might be waiting a long time. Plus, even after you have such an experience, you might find that you're quite disappointed because it might not have worked out the way that you thought it would. Oftentimes, we can have these flashy experiences and then they don't integrate well. So that can leave you with a flashy experience and then an unintegrated life. Whereas if you actually apply yourself consistently, day after day, to a consistent progressive integration of higher level awareness, so that you can better organize your content of your life, this will give you much better results. You will be much, much, much happier with this, I promise. So again, it's, you may not have you may have some very deep recognition now. You may not have much of a deep recognition. What I'm about to describe to you may have a very strong impact on you right away, and it may not have a strong impact on you right away. What I can promise you is, regardless of any of that, if you continue to consistently apply yourself to these investigations, you will see benefits in your life and you will be very happy with that because it will actually be integrated into your life. So at all levels, you will be more satisfied. There will be more harmony. And this will actually make perfect sense to you when you understand what it is that I'm pointing to here. Because I'm talking about you are you are a whole being. So oftentimes we are acting from a perspective of being a fragmented being. We identify as fragments. And so you might notice if you pay attention that you think of yourself as one person, but actually you're not acting as one person consistently. Think about this. In different contexts, you act differently. You have a different experience of yourself in different contexts. So in different types of relationships, you will have a different experience of yourself. If you have, like, at work, you might have one experience of yourself. In relationship with your spouse, you have a different relationship, a different sense of yourself. In relationship with your children, you have a different sense of yourself. If you're having a quote good day, you have one experience of yourself. If you're having a so-called bad day, you're having a different experience of yourself. There are so many different identities and roles that you take on that you identify with. And in that moment, this veil of delusion comes over you and you think, oh, I'm the same person. You're not the same person. You've taken on a different identity. So most of us have dozens, hundreds, thousands of unintegrated, fragmented subpersonalities and identities that we identify with variously at different points in time. And we don't even recognize that we're doing it. But of course, our experience will reflect that because our experience will be one that's unintegrated. And what I mean by that is that you might have some in some roles, in some moments, you will feel very competent, very confident, very happy, very peaceful. And then in other moments, in other roles, in other identifications, you'll feel totally the opposite. You'll feel depressed, angry, worthless, hopeless, fearful. If you don't have awareness of yourself as a total being, then it becomes virtually hopeless because you're identified as fragments, thinking that you're the same person in all of those situations, which is not true. It's a hypnotic trance. So here, the possibility is to recognize that you are a whole being and that you can organize and integrate in a coherent fashion all of your content so that you're not suffering from these same problems anymore. I'm giving you a lot of information. So I don't expect that this is actually going to make complete sense to most people at this point. So I just want to be clear about this. This is something that for most people requires a lot of repeated exposure and then direct exploration on a regular basis in order for this to really start to click. But I'm just giving you a lot of information. And then, this is just an overview. And then for those who choose to continue to explore it, then you will see the fruits of it as you continue to explore it in your life. So you at that highest level, I'm using the term highest level, but we could say most fundamental level or lowest level, however you want to understand it. But you at that level, as formless awareness, as the source, you are free of content, or I should say independent of content. So the content does not matter at all to you at that level. The content can't touch you. You are independent of it. You have no form, no substance. So you're like space. Is space affected by the content? No, it is not. So imagine if you have a room and you move the furniture around in the room. Is the space affected? And the answer to that is no. The space is unaffected by the rearrangement of the furniture. Rearrangement of the furniture cannot affect space because space is not an object. So if you have two pieces of furniture and you try to move them into the same space, then there's a problem, right? If you have two chairs and you try to put them into the same space, it won't work unless you're working with a different type of physics. But in our normal sense, you try to put two chairs in the same space, it won't work. You can have one in that space and another one has to be in a different space. But space is unaffected by the objects. So objects interact with one another. Space does not interact with objects. So at the highest level, at the level of formless self, at the level of pure awareness, pure consciousness, you are unaffected by any of the content. Now, this is good news because when you recognize and integrate this aspect of yourself, this gives you a very important perspective. Think about this. Better yet, feel it, notice it. If you're able to touch upon that now, if you're able to just be that space of formless awareness right now, if you just let go of the attachment to all the content for just an instant, notice what that does. You have no problems. Now, for most of us, we cannot maintain that. So I'm not suggesting that you should try to maintain that. I'm just saying for this one instant, when you let go of all the attachment to all the other stuff, just notice that there's no problem. It's actually impossible for there to be a problem. Nothing that could happen could be a problem to formless awareness because there's no attachment to any identity. There's no attachment to anything. Nothing that happens to any object or anything at any level of any of the content matters at all to this level. Why? Because think about it. We've already hopefully directly seen this, that all the content comes from this source and returns to this source. So this source is already the source of all of the stuff. It's already in and of itself absolutely complete and total. So how could it matter at all what happens to any of the content? It doesn't at this level. So again, being able to have this perspective, being able to access this perspective is enormously helpful because think about it. How many times are you stressed out? A lot of times, right? You're stressed out, feeling anxious, worried, angry, fearful, all these things. Why is that? It's because you're identified with a particular point of view, a particular piece of content. And from that level of identification, you have an agenda. You have certain needs. You have certain desired outcomes. And you think, my okayness depends upon that. So then, of course, you're going to feel stressed because you're threatened. When you can at least momentarily release that identification and shift to this highest level perspective where you have no problems, no identification, you gain the broadest possible perspective, and this will give you the most possible information, which will then allow you to be able to have new insights should you wish to then try and solve that problem. You cannot try to solve the problem from the level of pure consciousness because at the level of pure consciousness, there is no problem. But here at the level of pure consciousness, you have no agenda, which gives you access to all of the information unbiased. You don't have access to that at the level of identification. If you're a fearful person, angry person, you don't have that because you've cut yourself off. You're fragmented. You're just that limited identity in that moment. So it's very helpful to be able to release, at least temporarily, that identification and recognize yourself as that wholeness, that source, which gives you totality, which gives you all of the information, which is very, very helpful. Number one, it relieves the stress, at least temporarily. And number two, if and when you then identify again with some point of view, you then have greater resourcefulness. You have greater information, which allows you then to be able to solve the problems more effectively. Okay, so that's really, really important and helpful. But again, as I said, most of us are not going to be able to maintain that total release of all identification. It's not realistic, and it's not even desirable for most of us, because again, that would be a different path. That's the path of the renunciate. That's if you're going to go sit in a cave in the Himalayas and you're not going to have relationships, you're not going to have money, you're not going to attend to your body, you're not going to do any of those things. That's a different path. So it's not desirable for most of us to stay there, but it is very desirable for most of us to be able to access that. Now, when we access that, what that also allows us to do is to, again, notice the totality of not of the whole being. So the whole being is not exclusively formless. It is also that form, and that form includes all of the content. In fact, it includes all possible content. So this gives us more choices when we can step back and recognize we detach from all of the identification. When we detach from all the content momentarily, it gives us the broadest possible view. So we are now aware of all of the possible content, not just the one little speck that we had previously identified with. So now we can start to choose from that broadest perspective. What do I actually want? It also allows us to see how we have organized that content. Remember, I said that that content consists of just these five senses, but it's variously organized, infinitely organized into various different types of different permutations. So you can have a permutation. Think about this. So we think, typically, we're taught to think that things just happen, like anger just happens, and anger is just a thing. But if you actually start to inspect your experience and you view it through this lens, you'll have to start to recognize that anger is not just something that happens, and it's not just some random thing. Actually, anger is something that has structure, and that structure consists, and its content consists of these five senses. So you actually represent that anger in a particular way. It actually has a structure and has location in your experience. So you can actually start to notice that, identify that, and then you're no longer powerless. You actually have the ability to start to make changes. Because if you're just locked into just saying, it's anger, I'm an angry person, I'm experiencing anger, that person did something and now I'm angry, you have very few choices. You've just locked yourself in to being non-resourceful and just being an angry person, a reactive angry person who has no choice. When the trigger happens, you are an angry person. As long as you've identified in that way, then that's just how it is. You might hope that it will be a different way. You might wish and pray that it will be a different way, but until you actually have the knowledge, it's not going to change. When you have the knowledge, then it can change. So you can actually start to notice, what is this? What is the actual experience? What is the structure of it? Where do I experience it? It has a location. Pay attention. So you could just notice right now, in whatever you're experiencing right now, you can give a label to it or not. But just notice whatever you're experiencing. Notice that that experience consists of these five senses, right? You're seeing, tasting, smelling, feeling, and hearing. And that all of that has location. So in space, you've constructed all of this in your own space, in the space of consciousness that you are. You have constructed a space that has three dimensions. So you experience things as having locations in that space. If you don't identify where those locations are, it's very difficult to work with it. But once you've identified where the location is, suddenly it becomes workable. So, and this is applicable and helpful for all kinds of experiences, but initially I find that it's especially helpful for difficult or unwanted experiences. So let's take any unwanted experience that you have, that you commonly have, that you struggle with: fear, anger, resentment, guilt, shame, worry. And then imagine that now. So find some reference that you have for that. So some experience, some recent experience of that, some particular experience of it, some event that triggered that for you. And then notice that whatever that experience is, it actually has a location for you. And it can, so by location, I mean literally in three dimensions, there's some place where you perceive it and experience it. And it has qualities. So what are those qualities? You know, heavy, light, closed, open, still, moving, big, small. So the actual experience has location, it has qualities. With that awareness, you actually have the ability to start to make change based on your intention. So if all you do is call this experience by some name, then you've cast a spell over yourself, right? And then you imagine that you're powerless. So if you just say, "Oh, I'm just experiencing this anger again. Oh, I'm experiencing that anxiety again. Oh, I'm experiencing the worry again," then you've cast a spell over yourself, and you give yourself the impression that you're powerless. But if you actually start to notice, what is this actual experience? This actual experience consists of five senses, and it exists somewhere in the space of myself. I've given it a location. Find the location, notice its qualities. How do you experience it? Then you can start to actually change it. Instead of it being this thing that you don't, that is happening to you, it's actually something in your experience that you can change. So play with it. If you don't like the experience, change it. If it's a closed feeling, well, open it. If it's a heavy feeling, lighten it. And I'm not saying you should, this is um, it's not even to try and fix it. It's just to explore it. So I'm not saying that every time you feel a heavy feeling and you don't like that heavy feeling, you should make it light. I'm just saying just start to play with it so you can just start to notice what it actually is instead of just falling prey to the notion that this thing is happening to you. You can actually start to notice that you are you are the actual master if you allow yourself. If you allow yourself, you can actually have mastery over your own experience. But you have to start to notice that you are having the experience, that the experience is happening in you. When you notice that the experience is happening in you, then you have the ability to start to be exploratory, to start to play with it, not to necessarily try to fix it, but just to play with it, just to explore, to find out what is it actually. And then you can start to notice that what the experiences are. This is so incredible when you get this. The experiences are not they're not good things or bad things that are happening to you. They're just the way that you are organizing the content. And there are just certain habits by which you have organized that content unconsciously so that certain things happen by association. You then produce certain experiences by organizing the content in a certain way. So if somebody, so if you have organized yourself in such a way, I'm going to give an example. Okay. If you have organized yourself in such a way that you say, well, the way that I am, the way that my world works, the way that reality works for me is that um, everybody should always agree with me. And then you perceive that somebody is not agreeing with you. Then you say, okay, what's my program for when people don't agree with me? Well, then I organize my experience in this way. I I'm I move this experience over here down into the left, just to give an example, and I produce a heaviness to it and a contracted sense to it. And then I add in an auditory component that says something to me. that says, you know, I'm no good. I'm just giving an example. Now, what happens is if you don't know that you're doing that, and that just happens repeatedly over and over and over when that certain trigger happens, then you start to think, because you're ignorant of the fact that you're doing it, you start to think, oh, that's just happening. I'm a victim of this. I don't like it, and it's just happening. What do most people do? Most people then they try to identify the triggers and they try to avoid the triggers or change the triggers, right? They say, well, every time that somebody doesn't agree with me, then I have this unwanted experience. Therefore, they think, um, and they come up with some strategy. Like, I should avoid those situations and people where it's likely that somebody will disagree with me. This is how most people operate, right? And or they'll come up with some other strategy, like, well, I will work really hard to make sure that everybody agrees with me. They come up with some kind of strategy or strategies, trying to avoid or manipulate the triggers. This is how most people learn to operate. It's highly stressful and it's ignorant. Ignorant, not in a judgmental sense, ignorant in just the literal sense of actually ignoring what's actually going on. So it's very different then to notice that what's actually going on is that I've just constructed and organized the content of myself in this way. So that I say, if A, then B. If somebody doesn't agree with me, then produce this experience. That's it. That's all that's happened. Now you have lots of choices. Like, okay, I don't like that experience. Well, guess what? Okay, number one, I could relieve myself of that unhelpful that unhelpful expectation. Like, do I really need that expectation that everybody should agree with me? Let me take a look. No, no, that's not useful. Okay, I could let that go, right? Because that's just some content that I've just put there. Just consists of some I'm either visually or auditorily or otherwise representing that. Just some it's just organized somewhere in myself. I've just put it there and I keep referring to it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. Millions upon millions of times I've done that so that that habit becomes very strong. And I think that it's true because I've done it so many times, but it's just some content that I organized there. But once I become aware of it, I have the ability to change it. I can just say, well, gee, that's not helpful to me. I could let that go. And honest to goodness, it can be that simple. Not always. It will not always be that simple, but it can be that simple. The more awareness you have, it will become increasingly simple, right? It will become that simple when you have enough awareness. When you have enough awareness of who you are and you can really honestly recognize, well, that's just something that I did. I just organized myself in that way, and that's no longer helping me. Therefore, I let it go. You get to do that. Then, so that's one possibility. Another possibility, which would also be helpful to do concurrently, would be then. So that's like releasing part of the trigger is that unhelpful expectation. But then also you could relieve yourself of the habit of organizing that particular reaction, right? It's like, okay, so if somebody doesn't agree with me, is this reaction actually helpful to me? This reaction that I've organized, where I produce this feeling, this sensory data in this location in my experience and fixate on it, is that actually helpful to me? No. Well, then guess what? I could let that go. And again, it's not always initially that easy. It can become that easy, but initially it usually requires some more practice and investigation and using some skillful means in order to start to relieve oneself of that those unhelpful organizations within oneself. But that's fundamentally all that is really going on, is that you can actually start to reorganize yourself so that you are structured in a way that actually works for you. So you could actually be the person that you really want to be and know that you should be. Not because you have, not because you're fundamental okayness depends upon it, because it doesn't, because you can recognize that your fundamental okayness is always independent. It's that formless awareness is always okay, but rather because it's actually pleasurable and desirable to do so. Like, you actually can choose to be happy and aligned with what you really want. And you can do that just through having awareness and intention. So, again, this is a lot of information. I don't expect that most people will be able to uh, immediately do an enormous amount with this, but certainly, like, it's not the point I'm making is this is not likely to be an instantaneous sort of overnight shift. It could be for some people, right? Because it could be that this was the missing piece for somebody. And just having this filled in could be produce an amazing permanent positive shift for that person. But for most people, this is uh, something that you need to work with it consistently. And what that actually looks like is that you, on a daily basis, be aware of yourself in particular. So the practical step here. I mean, number one, I would recommend every day do that kind of inquiry that I guided, where you actually take a look and recognize that you are the space in which all of the content is occurring. And then, uh, second thing would be to bring awareness every time you notice that you are not enjoying your experience, and just find out what is actually going on. Instead of just labeling it and saying, oh, this is anger, oh, this is sadness, oh, this is fear, oh, this is that. Um, Actually bring awareness to find out what is the actual experience. What is the actual content and how is it organized in your experience? So what is its location? What are the qualities of it? What are the sensory modalities through which you are perceiving it? And then just start to play with it. Just start to find out, does it actually mean what you think it means? Does it actually, just because you have this feeling, does it actually mean anything? Just because you have a particular image that comes to mind, does it actually mean anything? Just because you think something, does that actually mean that it's true? Most people don't ever question this, right? But you can. And the more you do, the freer you will become. And the more you can then reorganize yourself so that you can be happy more of the time. This will make you more productive, will improve your efficiency in achieving your goals. It will give you greater clarity, greater ease. Everything will improve. That's what I think I promised that from the beginning, and it's true. So those are the two main things I would recommend. Number one, again, just to recap, is every day do that inquiry just so you can have the direct experience and recognize for yourself that you are that space in which all the things are happening, that they're coming and going, and they consist only of the five senses, so that all the content is structured as these five senses, and that they also, of course, also, as I've also pointed out, they take place in space. Time is also a way that we organize ourselves, but I didn't go into that today. We can, if people are interested, I can go into that in another time. But for today, just notice that it's the five senses, and then you organize those by various permutations in space. So you put them somewhere in space, and then you habitually give labels and tell stories about it. But the labels and stories turn out to be rather disempowering, because if once you've done that, you've solidified it, it's a thing, and now you're just, if you don't like it, now you're just a victim of it. You're just a victim of the anger. You're just a victim of the fear. You're just a victim of the sadness. But instead of doing that, just notice throughout the day, anytime that you're having unwanted experiences, just pause and notice, what is this actually? Where is it, and what is it? What does it consist of? What are the qualities? And then just start to play with it. And the playing with it is not necessarily to fix it. I want to be really clear about that. It's just to gain knowledge. That knowledge will help you, and and remedies may come out of that exploration, but I'm just proposing just explore for the sake of gaining knowledge, because that knowledge ultimately will be what helps you the most. So hopefully that's clear, practical steps that you can work with. I know, honestly, I know how it works. Most people will not do anything with that. And that's just how it is. Just understand, if you don't do anything with it, then you won't get any benefits from it. But for those who will do something with it, I promise you, if you consistently explore that, it will be life-changing. No question about it. So for those who are here live, I'm happy to stay on for the group coaching. And for those who are watching this recording on YouTube, I just want to make a few mentions. So number one, I am at this time still offering free introductory coaching sessions. I do want to mention that I am uh, thinking about how I'm going to reformulate that and restructure that in some way that I think will be more beneficial and valuable to everybody. But for the time being, I am still offering free introductory coaching sessions. And if you're interested in that, you can go to joeylott.com/intro, INTRO. And yes, all the hours or all the availability is usually already booked, but they do become new sessions no, it's not until the end of the year. It's only 2 weeks. I'm responding. I'm responding to comments here. But thanks for pointing that out. Yeah. So um, my calendar only shows availability for 2 weeks because I've set it that way, because I only allow people to book sessions 2 weeks in advance. And that's true of all of my sessions, paid and free. So if you go to my calendar and you find there's no availability showing for forever, that's only because there's no availability for the next 2 weeks, because everybody has booked all the available sessions for the next 2 weeks. However, every weekday, new sessions will become available for 2 weeks, that 2 weeks in advance, 2 weeks in the future. So if you check back, you may find sessions open up on weekdays if somebody else has not already booked them. Second thing is, anybody who is interested in joining these calls for live, you can get that information by going to my website, joeylott.com, and signing up for my newsletter, and you'll get an automated response with that information. And I'm seeing now that I think I've maxed out the available participants on Zoom. So I think I'm going to have to figure out a new solution for that. I think I'm going to have to switch to Zoom webinar. So if people are not able to join live temporarily, that will be resolved soon. Now that I'm aware that we've maxed out, because I think Zoom only allows 100 participants at a time. But I will change that in the near future, so that more people can participate live. And then the last thing I want to make mention is that for those who are interested in a supported way to organize your life and put all this into practice so that you can get optimal results, you may be interested in the Manifesting Truth program. It is a paid program that I offer, and you can get more information at joeylott.com/manifesting-truth. And there will be links to all of these in the description on YouTube. So that's it. For those who are live, again, stay on for group coaching. I'm going to just say thank you very much and blessings to all, to those who are watching on YouTube, and bye for now.